calls to you, arise, arise today. He calls for you to go and spread the news, arise, awake, awake. Salvation calls to every man, his greatest need of all. May blessed men who learn the way be faithful to the call.
Hi, welcome to Light from Above. My name is David Kenny. I am the preacher for the church in Newcomerstown, Ohio, but I'm here with Jonathan Hescht. He is a student from the West Virginia School of Preaching, and we're interviewing him today. He is slated to graduate coming up. When's graduation? Pretty soon, right?
Yeah, June.
So, John, thank you very much for making some time and being on the program. We actually had to re-record this because we had some technical problems the last time, so that was unfortunate, but we get to do some of these questions again, so you're well prepared to answer questions about yourself, hopefully. Let's just start out. First of all, in class, just getting to know you a little bit. You have a family history with the church. Why don't you give an idea a little bit about yourself as it relates to history relating to the church?
Okay. I definitely grew up in the church. My father was a preacher. On my mother's side, my grandfather was a preacher. Most of my uncles on that side have been either deacons or elders. So I had a large influence growing up, and then a lot of motivation to be active in the church. So as I grew up in the church, I did a lot with the youth group, and then on into being a deacon myself. And there was a lot of good role models.
Good. Well, one of the things that, working together on some of your qualifications and everything, and just reviewing some of that, you have a lot of experience in retail establishments and things like that. And why don't you give them just a little bit of idea of some of the places that you've worked outside of the church? Because I think it's important, which I'll show here in a minute, that you don't go into preaching right away. You went into these other type of retail enterprises. Why don't you give them a little bit of idea about that, about this time you spent in industry?
Okay. I spent a lot of time in management with CVS Pharmacy. I was with Family Dollar as a manager. I was with Books A Million as a manager. So there was a lot of different areas to cover. You would think retail would just be retail, but each one has its own little quirks that make it just different enough to have some extra experience.
So you spent quite a bit of time in retail, and of course, as you know, retail is working with the public, and working as a preacher is working with a segment of the public, but it's still the public. Were there things that you learned in working at retail that you have found application in ministry?
I think so. There's a lot with in working with the public in customer service, and the biblical idea of putting others first, making sure that you're doing everything you can to help them find what they need. Even working with the people under me, co-workers, delegating. So, you're not doing everything, but getting others involved. A lot of different aspects that help going into the ministry as opposed to retail.
So you have a long history with the church. You have a history of being in a family of preachers. You graduate and you pursue retail work, retail line. And now you're here at the West Virginia School of Preaching, studying and preparing yourself to be a preacher. Now, would you mind explaining a little bit or giving some people some insight on how you have, in a way, people would say that's sort of like coming full circle. How would you describe your path to getting back to doing what historically your family has been a part of for a long time. What brought you to this point?
Okay. Well, growing up, I did a lot in church with song leading, prayer, things like that. Spoke just a little bit, but not a whole lot. But I always admired the preachers in the family, things like that. And at one point, I had thought about going into preaching, but really the self-confidence in it wasn't there. And so as I went through school, focused more on areas like education, plus psychology, things like that, and went out, got into retail. I was successful enough at it that I got into management. So I had that career, and at one point, probably about 10 years after I graduated, I thought about going into ministry, and I even went down to Freed-Hardeman University, started graduate classes, but then met my wife, and wives are expensive. So I put a pause on that for the moment and went back to retail to help support and start a family. And then as I went on, I would have the chance here and there to fill in, speak, get a little more experience. And in the past few years, went through some health issues, had some chemo treatments for cancer, and that kind of put a lot into perspective and just made me feel like I needed to be pursuing an area of work that felt more substantial, more geared towards furthering the church, the kingdom, as opposed to just being a retail manager.
So you had this retail background. You decided to go and you want to go back into ministry because you've had these desires and you've had these events in your life that prompted you to do it. What did your wife think about whenever you decided? Because you start one way and then you get married and it's like, okay, then you want to go, you want to, it probably completely out of left field maybe to your wife, I'm not sure, but how did she react to you wanting to go into ministry?
Well, when I met her, I was down at Freed-Hardeman in the graduate Bible program, so she knew that I had an interest. And it was kind of the same with her family. Her grandfather was a preacher on her father's side, and in the past few years, her father has become much more of a vocational minister and working more full-time with that. And so she grew up in the church, was used to seeing that, and when I decided to make that change, she was very supportive. She was all for it.
Well, good. Now, give us some insight about your family. You're married, but tell me a little bit more about your wife and your family today.
Okay. I am married to Brandy. Brandy Stewart was her maiden name, from Tennessee. And so we met down there through my cousin and then moved back up the West Virginia way after a year or two. Have 2 children, Tegan, who is 11, and Cadence, that's 8, both girls. And Brandy actually somewhat works with the church already because she's a secretary for her congregation. And so we have that tie-in. We've tried to bring the girls up being familiar with the church, and so.
So when you were in retail, I'm sure you were just getting to know one another. You were always involved with the church. What were some of the things that you were doing when you were working in this retail environment? What kind of things were you doing with the church even then?
Well, during that, I was still always active as a song leader, participating in worship with, did different leadership roles, prayer, communion, doing things like that. I participated when I was younger. I participated in Lads to Leaders, the program that started through Nashville, and participated in that as I got older. I switched from a participant to a mentor and a coordinator for different areas. I became a deacon at the congregation, and I've worked with different areas like education, evangelism, and then right now as a deacon in the technology area. So over all of the PowerPoints and the computers and the live stream and different things like that, working to get it coordinated.
So you build up these skills and you use them for the church, for all that work, which is a good thing. But now you're thinking about actually being a preacher, which is a whole nother, really a different skill set. What is it like for you today versus, you said you did some preaching when you first graduated and started out just on your own, but what is preaching like today to you versus what it was back then, the preparation?
In preparation, from one side, the nervousness is still there, and hopefully will always be there with a lot of different things, like whether it's preaching or song leading or anything. I agree with a lot of different people that I've heard it from, that the moment that you are no longer nervous at all is the time to stop. But there's that. But also, after studying more, going to the School of Preaching here, when you're just doing it here and there, oddly, it seems much more easy to put together a sermon to speak, because mainly it's topical. You're just doing general things, and then as you learn more and study more, you have this bigger area of knowledge that you want to put in there, and so to a point, the longer I'm in school, the more I study, almost the harder it is to write a sermon, because there's so much that you want to put in, and somebody's not going to want to sit there while I preach for 4 or 5 hours. So it's good, learning the tools, learning different things to prepare and different ways to prepare, but it's all very interesting in getting it all worked out together.
There's a lot more preparation that goes into a sermon than I think a lot of people realize. Do you find that to be true?
Oh, yes. Yeah, with, starting with the scripture, obviously you always want to start in the Word. And then as you go through and study a passage, the more that different words will jump out to you. And so you want to find out, the meaning of those words, the meaning and possibly in the Greek to learn more of what the idea was getting across. Learning a lot of the trusted names of writers for commentaries to study and use, different things like that, and making sure that everything works together, and presenting it in a way that presents the truth in a way that is easily understood for everyone in the congregation, because not everybody in the congregation is on the same level. There are different levels, and you want everybody to be able to understand. So it's a lot of thought, a lot of preparation.
I know in film industry they talk about things that they take out. They say, well, that hit the cutting floor. It was gone. It's trash. They left it out. And I imagine if your preparation is like mine, there's just a lot of things you learn that you cannot put it in there because the constraints just won't allow it. It may not. It might be a time constraint, or it might be even something that doesn't really necessarily pertain to the subject at hand. It's like I don't want to say it's a tangent, but it's something that's really interesting, but it's like, okay, well, my focus is this lesson itself, and if I go off here, then it may be relevant, but it may not be germane or, of the most importance to it. Working in retail myself, one of the things I notice about companies, and you may have a different experience, but I've worked in a lot of restaurant retail, and I've done convenience store retail. And one of the things I found about them, they always want to sort of be all things to all people. They'll want to, I mean, they want to sell hot cashews. So they have a little display over here for hot cashews. They want to sell hot dogs. And this is a gas station. I'm like, well, you're a gas station. I mean, how much of this are you going to do? They have, you could buy cases of cola. Well, I understand that. But there's only, the square footage of a room is only so much you can actually accomplish. But companies seem to always want to expand and experiment and do all these kinds of things. And I was just wondering, have you ever wondered about the idea, that kind of challenge versus the work of the church? What is the work of the church really supposed to focus on, and what are some things that maybe that could become distractions to it? First of all, what should the church really be focused on?
Well, the biggest areas that the church should be focused on are, number one, learning the word themselves, studying, and then getting that word out to as many people as possible. We have the Great Commission to go preach, teach, baptize, and then we also have the fact that, like we see from the apostles at the beginning of the church, the establishment of the church, taking care of each other and kind of being almost that, all things, and the idea of being able to take care of this issue and help this person, being able to take care of this issue, whether it's somebody like as of recently that might have been the victim of a flood, and what can we do to help them? And at the same time, you have another brother or sister in Christ that might need, emotional support. And so from that, from all those different backgrounds, you kind of end up, especially as the preacher, wearing a lot of different hats and going in a lot of different directions. And so some of the things that can come in as distractions would be trying to take care of all of those areas at once yourself, and not delegating, asking for help, trying to nurture the other brethren of the congregation to be more active, to be more comfortable being active, things like that. And you can get lost, get burnt out, and it's just the need to stop and think and focus. Like we see with Elijah. At one point, he was ready just for the end to come and for God to go ahead and kill him, but God had him stop, take a nap, get a snack, and then he was ready to travel on and listen to what God had to say. And so it's just stop and taking some time to evaluate everything you're doing and how you can best help everyone and not get too spread out.
I know you do a lot of work with the congregation you work with relating to technology. Could you give them some insight on, because I know that in today's age, a lot of people have smartphones now, but when I started preaching, there was no such thing. There was no such thing as the internet. There was no such thing as a cell phone. There was, it's interesting to watch us go into those things, and some generations, they're resistant to it. They don't understand it, which is understandable. Some of the things are complicated. But eventually, as time goes by, people embrace certain elements and certain things go by the wayside. What do you think technology has to offer to enhance the work of the church, and how do you help the church use technology?
Well, one example is one good thing that came out of kind of a rough time with COVID and everything was that idea of live streaming with services. And you can go back and forth on the pros and cons of things like that. But being able to have that, getting it out there, once we've started live streaming, there are shut-ins for the congregation that are able to get on and still feel like they're part of the congregation. There are people from the area that have ended up getting on and watching some because they know this person or that person in the congregation, and there are different members that actively share the services on social media as service starts, and they invite people to watch. And so that's a way that they can get the word out there, if they're not comfortable doing it themselves. And then also, right now, with our live stream at the congregation I attend, we have people that watch that are in the United States, but also in Europe and India, Pakistan, quite a few different areas. So we're able to get that reach out farther. And that's a lot of what technology does have to offer between the live streaming and social media. And if you have a generation that's growing up that has now only known electronics and they're always stuck to the screen, if you're able to be on there, even doing little videos or 1 to 3 minute videos about maybe a little lesson, or more advertisements for the area about different events that are happening in the congregation, and you can actually set things on there to catch certain demographics as they're near your church, and so more people get that content. They get the church gets more exposure in a good way, which is what we need, and it gives a whole nother platform and a way of reach that's more general and more immediate.
Now with COVID, now you can relate this, whether it's from your standpoint accurate or not, but it seems like some congregations were just not so willing to use like Facebook Live. I mean, Facebook Live is practically, you never heard of it. Of course, Facebook developed it in time, but all of a sudden, because of COVID, all of a sudden now you would have all these Facebook Lives from all these different either preachers or congregations or everything trying to deal with the effects of COVID on congregations and the mitigation measures that we had to go through. But I've sort of noticed that a lot of congregations developed that. They were sort of shoved into it. They've developed sort of a comfort level, and all these things are really inexpensive for a congregation to be able to do. You need to have some manpower behind it, but even that is not difficult to do. But I'm seeing, it looks like that the places that started, and I'm not sure what their attitude was beforehand, but they're still doing those things. They're still doing Facebook Live. They're still doing these ways of keeping members of the congregation that aren't able to go to services connected to the church, which is so important. Like for my mother, towards the end of her life, she couldn't go to services. She had MS. She was, she couldn't leave her bed, and she couldn't do there. But she was able to be connected through electronics as if she was there. Now, it's not the same thing as actually being there, and I think everybody recognizes that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, some people were, I don't know if they're anti-technology or if they're just not thinking all the way through, but on some of these issues. But I don't know that some people really understand what it's like to be shut in, to not be able to get out, to not be able to do anything. And I was wondering, did you see some of that attitude change when people were not allowed to go out because of COVID? They weren't allowed to meet because of COVID? Did you see a shift in that? Because I know there's a shift in attitudes about that. Mm-hmm. Did you see some of that where you were at too? Oh,
definitely. Like before COVID, we were actually talking about trying to live stream service, and there was a lot more, not in a mean intended light or viewpoint, but it was more of the negative side of, well, if we do this, are more people going to start not coming and just turning it on the TV, things like that, and people won't be there for service, and so they're not really worshiping together and things like that. And it just, as we were forced to do it, it made a lot of people, I think, reevaluate their opinion and reevaluate the fact that even though there are going to be negatives, you have to weigh the negatives versus the positives. And being able to have that available, being able to have that reach that I was talking about, being able to include those people that might not be included another way, far outweighed the negatives that had been looked at before, and more people started seeing that and understanding it. And it definitely turned into a very useful outreach.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Let's go back to your studies. Just a little bit more about your classes and everything. What have been some of the classes that really stand out to you? I mean, I know they're all important and all that, and you have a lot of background, but what are some classes that you're going to go away from here going, I'm going to remember this class, and why?
Well, there are a few different ones for a few different reasons. Part of the first year was the courses of the Old Testament, because we have X number of stories that we always look at, especially in the kids' classes growing up. Everybody is familiar with those. But there are a lot of things that you don't go as deep into, and there are a lot of things, especially like with some of the minor prophets and things, where they tend to get ignored. And stopping to look at each one and how they connect together and different things like that, it just brings a different light to it. And it was valuable for me to be able to have that in-depth study. Now, on another standpoint, there were the classes in Christian evidences, which even at Freed-Hardeman, I had a little bit of classes with the idea of logic and things like that. But having it here more in depth, going through all of the different areas of apologetics and seeing how different criticisms, to textual criticism, things like that, have come in, and being more familiar with different ways to refute that and being able to, and having opportunities to pass that along. I feel like that is something that's really going to be helpful, because we don't, or at least in my opinion, a lot of times we don't put as much of a focus on that as we should, because we're commanded to go out, take the word, watch for those, mark those that are teaching false doctrine, and we need to be able to be at the ready to study, to teach, and things like that. Along with that, some of the others, the classes in Greek definitely will always be helpful, because learning, not even necessarily becoming an expert, but just being able to look at it, to go to a lexicon, and then look back at the Greek New Testament and seeing what the different, why they translated some of the words the way they did, and understanding that idea, and then being able to pass that on to a congregation, to fellow Christians, is, I think, invaluable. And then, of course, I will always treasure the class of the preacher and media taught by David Kinney.
Yeah, here we go. So, moving right along. So you graduate, Lord willing, this spring. And what are your plans upon graduation?
Well, right after graduation, I was lucky enough to get into a program with Terry Jones at the Pennsboro Church of Christ congregation. And so for a year, I'll be working there in a spot where I'm with a minister that's been with the same congregation for over 30 years, getting advice and things like that. And so it's nice to know where you're going to go right away. And then after that, we'll just be looking for a congregation that we can work with, and hopefully we can help and they can help us as my family grow as Christians, and then just doing different projects to help spread the word.
Okay. Well, Jonathan, we really appreciate your time and getting to know you, and appreciate all the diligence you put forth in your studies, and we look forward to see great accomplishments in the future. So thank you very much for being a part of the program.
Oh, yeah, thank you for having me on here.
All right, that's all the time we have now. Thanks again for watching Light from Above. Before we close the program, we'd like for you to consider where you are on the roadmap to heaven. There are all kinds of incorrect directions on how to get to heaven. Some have been given wrong directions. Others are not even looking at the Bible, which is like not looking at a roadmap at all. If you expect to get to your destination, then you must follow the roadmap and its directions. If you want to get to heaven, then you must follow the Bible and its directions too. So we thought we would review with you what the New Testament teaches about the plan for man's salvation. Of course, one must look at the correct map, which is the Bible. Then one must believe God's Word, John 8:24, Hebrews 11 verse 6. Then one must repent, turn away from sin, Acts chapter 2:38 and chapter 17 verse 30. Then one must confess their belief in Jesus as God's Son, Matthew 10:32, Romans 10:10. Then one must be immersed or baptized to have their sins washed away and put on Christ, Mark 16:16, Romans chapter 6, 3-5, Galatians 3:27, and 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 21. After baptism, one is added to the church by the Lord, Acts 2:47. Then the Christian must remain faithful in worship and service to the Lord and His church all the days of their life. This is the roadmap to heaven. If we can help you with more information for your journey, please let us know.
Gospel Broadcasting Network offers a free, non-denominational Bible course. It's based strictly on God's Word and not the creeds or traditions of men. Why not contact us for lesson number 1?
Walking in sunlight, sunlight of love. Heavenly sunlight, heavenly sunlight.
You may want to enroll by email. The address is info@gbntv.org. To enroll by phone, call us toll-free at 888-805-3390.
Arise, arise, the Master calls to you. Arise, arise today. He calls for you to go and spread the news. Arise, awake, awake. Salvation calls to every man, his greatest need of